Take a look at these images. Can you guess what these have in common? All of them are wide-angle shots. In fact, I would say around 90% of my images are shot using a wide-angle lens between 16 and 24mm. That's not surprising considering wide-angle lenses are great for capturing vast scenes, and with the right composition we can create a sense of depth and scale. That's why these lenses are so popular amongst landscape photographers. Now these examples have another thing in common. All of them were shot using the new TTArtisan 14mm f2.8 full-frame lens. Let's take a closer look at it, and let me tell you, I'm really excited because we're looking at a wide-angle lens with a big aperture and a price tag of just under $200 US. It's super budget friendly. So far I have a 16 to 35mm and a 9mm full-frame lens, so I was excited when TTArtisan reached out to test their new product, filling the gap with 14mm. Especially with the aperture of f2.8, it makes it predestined for astrophotography, but more on that later. For the first test I took it out to the forest, checking out a few different waterfall locations. We had quite a bit of rain for the past week, so great conditions for a bit of waterfall photography. Usually you don't want to shoot waterfalls like this from a frontal point of view, because we're losing depth this way. It just makes the whole scene look way too flat. Instead, look for compositions coming a bit from the side. Always looking for something to include as foreground element to make the composition more appealing. For the first location it was a bit tricky because of the steep slope I was standing on, but there was a beautiful fern which I tried placing in the bottom corner of the image. And shooting small tight spots like these is where the 14mm wide angle really shines, as I can nicely frame the whole waterfall plus the fern in the foreground, and I still can give the main subject some room to breathe at the top. This works both horizontally and vertically here. I'm not sure which version I like more. What do you think? The vertical shot nicely fits the shape of the waterfall and the fern does fill the bottom part perfectly, but the horizontal one has some more room to the sides, framing it a little better. To get the water to look nice and smooth, I used a longer shutter speed of around 1.6 seconds. If you want to have a little more detail in the water, I suggest you use shorter shutter speeds of around 1/3 of a second or up to 0.5 seconds, depending on the size and the speed of the waterfall. On longer hikes, smaller, more lightweight lenses like these are a big plus. That's one of the benefits of a prime lens. But what I noticed, due to its compact build, I do struggle adjusting the aperture ring as it's kind of close to the camera body. It's not a big deal really, since I don't have to be fast adjusting the aperture when shooting landscapes like this, but I think it's something worth mentioning. Also, the aperture ring is the only way to change aperture. You can't adjust it through the camera, but I don't see any downside to that, except maybe not being able to get the aperture info from the metadata later on. This lens also doesn't have autofocus, but again, as this lens is great for landscape photography, we don't really need autofocus, just set the focus manually. What this lens does have though is a lens thread. Not in the typical sense, because as you can see, the glass is quite bulbous, so there is no way to attach a filter here, but we can screw on the lens hood, and on here where the lens cap goes we can attach a filter. That's awesome, because I mostly shoot with polarizing or ND filters, especially for waterfalls like this, but a lot of these super wide angle lenses are missing a filter thread, so that's a big plus for the TTArtisan glass. I also wanted to see how bigger waterfalls look through this lens. Luckily the next day was gloomy and rainy again, so perfect conditions one more time. This spot was quite a bit more challenging due to the spray of the waterfall and heavy rain. Standing right in front of it made it hard getting a clear image because after seconds the camera was soaked. So I had to get out of the spray direction, moved a little closer to the side and started looking for another composition with some tree trunks in the water, leading right to the subject. Again, I shot both vertically and horizontally, which is only possible due to the wide angle of this lens. But the image quality from this lens looks crisp and sharp. Only towards the edges I can spot some softer areas, but only after really looking for them. When posting photos to Instagram, for example, these will practically be unnoticeable, and even when printing, I don't think these areas are much of a problem. Really not that bad for a $200 lens. But enough of waterfalls, there are two more things I was particularly interested in: shooting directly into the sun and astrophotography. Now, why would I shoot directly into the sun? To create this sunstar effect. I love them. They add something interesting to your landscape images, but you kind of want to use some ultra wide angle lens to capture them, because the longer the focal length, the uglier the sunstar gets. That's why one of the first things I test with new wide angle lenses like these is how the sunstar looks like, because it looks different from lens to lens. The trick for a perfect sunstar is to shoot with a small aperture, in this case f/16, and importantly, you want the sun to be almost completely blocked by something. This can be a tree, mountains, or in this case this little chapel. This will create a sharp looking sunstar with minimal clipping in the highlights. If I would shoot directly into the sun without it being blocked like in this image, you see the sunstar becomes kind of very muddy looking and it's not very pleasing. Sunstar quality for this lens, however, is great. Now what about astrophotography? Since this lens has a maximum aperture of f2.8, it makes it perfect for low light situations, and the 13mm wide angle is great to capture the Milky Way in all its glory. Since I got this lens back in July, I waited patiently for the right weather conditions to be able to get some test shots of the Milky Way. But every time it was either overcast or the moon was up, filling the night sky with bright light, reducing the visible stars significantly. But nonetheless, taking a look at this image, we can see image quality isn't looking bad at all for nighttime shots. Details don't get mushy and the stars look decent except towards the outer edges again, where we will run into smaller issues, especially when shooting with a wide open aperture. This image was shot at f2.8 and this one at f4, which already noticeably reduces this problem at the cost of light sensitivity. To improve image quality, you would have to go for a different, more expensive lens, but keep in mind this one is just under $200, so having some distorted stars in the very corner of the image is totally fine for the price tag. Exposure wise, the 14mm does have another benefit, as you can expose a little longer without stars turning into streaks. If you expose too long, we get these lines because of the Earth's rotation. But thanks to the 500 rule, we can calculate how long we can expose. For that, simply divide 500 by the focal length, so 500 divided by 14 would give us an exposure time of around 35 seconds. It's still worth checking the image after shooting and play around with the exposure. I usually lower it a bit further. In this case I went with 15 seconds because otherwise I would actually overexpose parts because of the moon and the whole light pollution going on. Here is the raw image compared to the edited version. I have been testing this lens quite extensively over the past couple of weeks, so let me give you a list of benefits and downsides. Let's start with the good stuff first. Huge plus, of course, the price tag. It just costs under $200 giving you more than acceptable image quality for this. The aperture makes it a great option for low light situations as it's a prime lens, it's small and lightweight, perfect when you want to save weight. We can attach filters to it thanks to the 77mm filter holder, which isn't that common with those super wide angle lenses. The lens feels super robust with its full metal build. Of course, we also want to look at the downsides. I personally have problems adjusting the aperture ring while shooting. That's the one thing standing out to me the most. It is a prime lens, we don't have any focal range, which makes it less flexible when shooting different things. I love my 16 to 35mm lens for that reason. It's manual focus only, something I don't care about at all with wide angle lenses, but I feel like I have to mention it as a downside. So TTArtisan's new 40mm f2.8 lens is a versatile lens for us landscape photographers. Should you get it? If you're looking for a budget wide angle lens and can handle being limited to one focal length, then definitely get this lens. I had a lot of fun with it and I will keep using it a lot more, especially for getting more into astro and nighttime photography. It is available for Canon L and RF mount, Nikon Z mount and of course Sony E mount. So do you have any questions about this lens? Did I forget to mention anything in this review? Please let me know in the comments. I hope this video was interesting and will be useful for you to decide, and thank you very much for watching this video.